We're tackling a really important and frankly heavy topic: fascism. We're going to break down what it is, look at the kind of destruction it's caused in the past, and really get into why understanding it is so critical for protecting our rights right now, today.
So let's start with this quote, because it really lays the groundwork. It defines fascism as an ideology of dictatorship, extreme nationalism, and suppression of opposition. Every single one of those concepts points to a system built on total control. And a system like that, well, it has to dismantle the very idea of individual human rights just to exist.
Here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll define what fascism actually is. Then, we'll see how it goes after our rights, look at some tough lessons from history, and explore how human rights became our best defense, a defense we still have to fight for today.
All right, so let's get right into it with part one. What exactly is fascism? It's a word that gets thrown around a lot, but it describes a very specific and very dangerous kind of political system. At its absolute core, fascism is a system where one single party, a dictatorship, holds all the power. And what does that actually mean? It means any opposition, any criticism is shut down by force. There's just no room for debate, no room for anyone to disagree. The goal is total control over everything.
And this is how they do it. This slide breaks down that control into its key ingredients. You've got one-party rule, so there goes any real political choice. The leader has absolute power, often propped up by this cult of personality. Political freedom, gone. The media is censored until it's just a megaphone for the state. And the whole thing is held together with force and fear, all wrapped up in this flag of extreme aggressive nationalism.
And listen, this isn't some abstract theory. This really happened. This timeline shows just how fast this ideology exploded onto the scene. It starts with a few regimes popping up in the 1920s. By the 1930s, it's spreading like wildfire and gaining incredible power. And by the 1940s, its aggression plunges the entire world into war. The speed of it was just terrifying. That history brings us right to our second section, the attack on rights. Here, we're going to see how fascism takes a wrecking ball to freedom piece by piece.
The destruction of rights under fascism isn't an accident. It's the whole point. First, freedom of speech goes. You can't say what you think if it goes against the state. Second, democracy is crushed. Elections become a complete sham. Third, minority groups get targeted, used as scapegoats for everything. Fourth, random arrests and violence become everyday tools to keep people quiet. And all of that leads to the fifth and final outcome, a society drowning in fear and inequality, where your basic dignity means nothing.
Okay, now let's ground all this in the real world with our third section, a lesson from history. We're going to look at the absolutely devastating consequences.
The historical record could not be more clear on this. History shows that fascism caused war, destruction, and immense suffering. That's not a political opinion, that's just a fact. It's cause and effect. The core ideas of this ideology will always lead to massive conflict. And this just lays out the horrifying scale of that cost. We're talking about World War II, the deadliest conflict in all of human history. We're talking about the systematic horror of concentration camps, entire cities just wiped off the map, and massive refugee crises that uprooted millions of people. This is the real legacy of fascism.
But, out of all that darkness, an incredibly powerful idea came into focus. And that brings us to Section 4, the power of human rights, our shield against this kind of tyranny.
This slide just lays it out so clearly. It is a fundamental conflict of values. On one side, you have fascism, which is all about suppression, control, and discrimination. And on the other, you have the core principles of human rights, freedom, justice, and equality. They are polar opposites. One wants to crush the individual for the sake of the state. The other wants to protect the individual from the state.
So, what exactly does this shield of human rights protect? Well, it protects freedom, the very first thing a fascist regime tries to stamp out. It protects equality, which is the perfect antidote to that toxic us versus them nationalism that fascism needs to survive. It guarantees justice and dignity, so the state can't just treat people like they're disposable. All of these rights work together to build a wall against tyranny.
Which brings us to our final, and maybe our most important section, our defense for today. How do we take these lessons from the past and actually apply them right now?
So how do we build that defense? History gives us a pretty clear roadmap. It starts with respecting democracy, not just when it's convenient. It means actively calling out and rejecting hatred and discrimination wherever we see it. This one is so important. It means protecting freedom of expression. Because the moment we start saying some ideas are just too dangerous to even be heard, we're starting to use the tools of a tyrant. It's about promoting tolerance, and most of all, it's about never, ever forgetting these lessons.
Really, it all boils down to this one powerful idea. The best, most proven, most essential defense that we have against fascism coming back is the active protection of human rights for everyone. It's like our collective immune system against tyranny.
And so that leaves us with a pretty heavy question to think about. If human rights really are our strongest defense, are we doing enough to protect them? Are we really paying enough attention?